I want to say good morning to everyone who's here in the committee room, those of you who are out in other means of communicating in this, our very first hybrid hearing of the subcommittee on commodity exchanges, energy, and credit. We're going to talk today about an exciting and very, very important subject, especially in context of what's going on in our country today. As the economy continues to struggle, the effects of the coronavirus pandemic, Americans in towns both large and small are keeping an eye on not only their own health, but also on their financial bottom line. For all Americans, that includes thinking about the cost of energy that powers our homes, our cars. But for that American farmer, that also includes thinking about additional ways that our farmers can boost their incomes as the farm economy continues to lag. There could be no more important issue than the one we're going to deal with today. We can do without a lot of things, but we cannot do without food and without water. So today's topic touches on both of those things because we're talking about on-farm energy. Energy is a particular concern for farmers, for ranchers, as approximately 15% of production costs for U.S. farms is tied up in energy costs. By comparison, the average American household spends just a little over 2% of its budget on electricity and the same amount for gas. The better a farm operation is able to manage its energy costs, the better it can weather the tough times, like what we're seeing clearly today. I'm excited to have 4 innovative farmers here with us today. Our witnesses are going to talk about the pioneering work underway on their own farms to explore ways of reducing their energy use, develop alternative sources of energy, and grow more diverse income streams. This is a discussion that I know will benefit every farmer and rancher who's watching. And our discussion of how these folks are going to work on homegrown energy sources on the farm is one that I hope will help move our climate discussion forward as well, highlighting especially the capacity of agriculture as a source of clean, domestic renewable energy. And today we'll look at the programs in the 2018 Farm Bill that help to encourage investment and exploration in the field of on-farm energy creation, storage, and use. These programs in the energy and conservation titles range from ones that help producers transition to cleaner and more efficient energy systems, and ones on the cutting edge of new bio-based energy feedstocks. We'll also look at other ways farmers are helping to move the renewable energy forward by exploring solutions like our wind, our solar, within their operations as well. In consultation with the ranking member and pursuant to Rule 11E, I wanted to make members of the subcommittee aware that other members of the full committee may join us today. And now I recognize Ranking Member Austin Scott for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling today's hearing to review on-farm energy production. I believe this hearing is very timely, given the current discussions taking place on the future of U.S. energy policy and the future of U.S. agriculture. Recently, the majority staff, about 3 weeks ago, of the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis released a report, a very large report, as I just held up, recommending congressional action needed to meet a goal of reaching a net zero greenhouse gas emissions economy-wide no later than 2050. And while I think that a lot of the recommendations focus too much on reducing America's dependence on fossil fuels and not enough on emissions, in other words, if we could move from diesel to natural gas, that certainly is a benefit to the environment, that the focus on emissions would be more productive than the focus on simply eliminating fossil fuels. But specifically, this report outlines principles for a federal carbon price, which is a direct tax on businesses and consumers. Now, I want to make this clear. I believe that we can and we should do a better job of taking care of the environment. And in taking care of the environment, we have to acknowledge that the habitat is important to the wildlife of this country. And I'm prepared to work in a bipartisan manner to improve upon current programs and find new solutions. But I cannot support an extreme climate agenda that fails to consider rural Americans will have to shoulder the burden of the majority of the staff proposals that have come out in this report. Many of these proposals aim to uproot the basic underpinning of our farming, manufacturing, energy, and transportation systems and require changes of marginal or unknown benefit that would have significant implications for the profitability of U.S. agriculture and the U.S. economy. The report recognizes its glaring consequences and makes several recommendations for funding economic transition payments. In other words, the report's authors know and acknowledge that there are harmful consequences to their proposals, and rather than develop better, more thoughtful proposals in a bipartisan nature, they continue to recommend federal overreach and dismantling of a strong business and agricultural communities. Many of the agricultural recommendations do highlight the benefits Farm Bill programs play in assisting farmers, ranchers, and foresters in being the best stewards of the land. However, some of the recommendations also uncover what seems to be a hidden agenda: increased compliance and government control of our producers' land and livelihood. This is in direct conflict with the bipartisan principles that on-farm stewardship should be locally led, voluntary, and incentive-based. The 2018 Farm Bill has voluntary farm programs that help farmers implement new practices that sequester carbon, reduce emissions, and adopt more energy-efficient farming practices. One of these programs proven to be effective is the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. The Natural Resources Conservation Services, or the NRCS, has adopted anaerobic digesters as a conservation practice and provides cost-share assistance to producers. This allows farmers and ranchers to voluntarily implement this innovative on-farm energy production practice by receiving financial and technical assistance through EQIP. Another important program in the Farm Bill is the Rural Energy for America program, which promotes energy efficiency and renewable energy development through grants and guaranteed loans. Grants may be used to finance energy audits for renewable energy technical assistance and site assessment, while the guaranteed loans may be used for construction of renewable energy systems like anaerobic digesters, wind turbines, or solar panels. As mentioned before, making these improvements on the farm can produce a variety of benefits for farmers and ranchers. For example, using an anaerobic digester turns waste into energy, which can then be used for several purposes, including generating electricity to help run the farm, processing it further into high-quality fuels, or even sold to the local power grid. These improvements allow farmers and ranchers to reduce input costs needed to operate their farm and can even help increase income. While it's easy to talk about the benefits of on-farm energy production for farmers and ranchers, I would be remiss if I did not mention barriers to entry. There are generally extremely high costs to build the infrastructure needed for on-farm energy production. While the Farm Bill programs help cover some of the costs involved, many farmers and ranchers do not have the ability to take on these additional upfront costs today to make farm improvements due to their current state of the farm economy. Mr. Chairman, we've got a great panel of witnesses that I look forward to hearing from. They have extensive knowledge of on-farm energy production. I want to thank them for joining us today. I'm looking forward to a productive discussion on what we can do to improve access to these programs. And let me once again say, I think that we can and should do a better job of taking care of the environment. With that said, Mr. Chairman, committed to working with you to find the path forward.
Thank you, Congressman Scott. All members are reminded that face coverings are required for attendance at meetings longer than 15 minutes in committee hearing rooms. This is in accordance with Section 3.2.1 of the Attending Physicians Guidelines. Now I'd like to recognize Chairman Peterson for any opening comments he'd like to make.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. This is something that I've worked on, been involved in for a long time, and there's no question that we can produce energy on the farm. You know, we've been able to, a number of different ways, do that over the years. The problem has been to be able to make the economics work long term. And to some extent, it's a scale, to some extent, it's technology, to some extent, it's a problem with what happens with other energy sources. You know, so when oil collapses, then that changes the equation in terms of how the rest of this stuff works. So I am all in favor of doing whatever we can to exploit this and to be able to do as much as possible on the farm of renewable energy. But, and I've told a lot of people this over the years, that it's got to be able to be, at some point, stand on its own. You know, I'm okay with helping it get started and okay with, you know, having some ability to get it going, but there's got to be a light at the end of the tunnel. It can't be something that the government is going to subsidize forever. And we have some of that going on in some of these areas. And, you know, it just, you know, it's like I say, I'm for all energy, whatever it is, whether it's oil, gas, you know, ethanol, whatever it is, as long as it makes economic sense, you know, and it works and it's viable for the long term. And so I hope that as we provide support, that we do it in a way that we're supporting things that have the ability to be viable in the long term. And that's been a challenge, some of the stuff that's happened. And you know, I just think we need to keep that focus on it. So, Chairman, I appreciate your leadership in calling this hearing today. I look forward to hearing what the witnesses have to say. I've got other hearings going on, so I may not be here the whole time, but again, thank you for what you're doing. I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Peterson. Appreciate your comments. And now I'd like to recognize our distinguished ranking member, Congressman Mike Conaway, for any opening comments he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, appreciate you having this hearing. I also appreciate you starting with a prayer. I think we deliberate better when we start that way, so thank you for doing that. I agree with most everything that's been said. The real question for me, though, is who pays for it? Chairman mentioned the government pays for it. It's really the taxpayers that ultimately fund all of those programs that we put in place, and whether it's a tax subsidy that goes out directly, or whether it's some sort of a transfer payment between the folks that are in the system, all of those things. At the end of the day, the chairman's exactly right. Can we afford it? Does it make sense? I noticed recently when the price of oil collapsed in March, some of the anti-oil folks were gleeful about that. Truth of the matter is, they really should want really high oil prices, really high gasoline prices, because it makes all of these other alternatives competitive against the current system. So whatever that utopia looks like out there that doesn't use fossil fuels, And maybe that's, centuries from now we'll get there. But in the meantime, we got to afford it. We got to be able to live. We got to be able to sustain it. We got to be able to keep our families alive and those kind of things. So as we go up at about these projects, figuring out who pays for it, where that cost gets ultimately settled, is really a key to making this thing work. And so again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for having this hearing. I appreciate our witnesses being here, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Conaway. The chairman would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so the witnesses may begin their testimony and to ensure that we have ample time for questions. And I would like to welcome all of our distinguished witnesses. Thank you for being here on this, our very first hybrid committee meeting. Our witnesses today, first, Mr. Jim Falk, who is president of Falk Seed Farm Incorporated, co-owner of Falk Farm on behalf of the Minnesota Farmers Union and National Farmers Union from Murdock, Minnesota. Next, we have Mr. Bryant Sievers, Mr. Bryant J. Sievers, who is the owner of Sievers Family Farms, Chief Operating Officer, Agri-Renew, on behalf of America Biogas Council, Stockton, Iowa. And we have Mr. Will Harris, who is the owner of White Oak Pastures, Bluffington, Georgia, from our beloved state of Georgia. Of course, all of our states are beloved. Now I will recognize the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Bard, to make an introduction of our final witness.
Thank you, Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Scott and members of the subcommittee, as well as Chairman Peterson of the Ag Committee and Ranking Member Conaway of the Ag Committee. It is definitely my privilege to introduce to you today the founder and chairman of Fair Oaks Farms, Dr. Mike McCloskey. Dr. McCloskey has followed his passion for animal agriculture since the early 80s when he ran a successful veterinary clinic, and this passion has led him to creating Fair Oaks Farm along with one of the nation's largest dairy cooperatives. And in that process, the creation of a dairy-based wellness product. So in addition to being chairman of Fair Oaks Farms, Dr. McCloskey has worked tirelessly in the agricultural community by serving on numerous boards and associations. He is the chairman of the Environmental Issues Committee within the National Milk Producers Federation. And like all farmers, Dr. McCloskey understands the need to be good stewards of our environment. He's been able to seek out opportunities for environmentally sustainable practices that are beneficial to agriculture. And a good example is that he has installed their first anaerobic digester in 2002. Which process cow manure and food waste into electricity. 7 years later, they built their second digester with the goal of creating renewable biogas. And that's some of the information that he's going to share with us here today. In partnership with Cummins and Kenworth, Dr. McCloskey has a fleet of over 40 trucks that run on renewable compressed natural gas from the biogas. And each truck has traveled over 1 million miles transporting milk from farms to processing facilities. This record of achievement is why Dr. McCloskey is before us and before this committee today. He possesses an expertise from the decades of working in the dairy industry and the agricultural industry in general. I really look forward to hearing his testimony before this committee and how we can improve the lives of farmers and rural communities. So I want to welcome Dr. McCloskey. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The chairman would request that any other members submit their opening statements for the record so that our witnesses may begin their testimony to ensure we have ample time for questions. Let me, if I may, start off with my questions. Before I do that, Ashley, excuse me for 1 minute. Where am I?
7. For your testimony.
I did, but this is repeat yourself.
Okay.
Then
Recognize Mr. Falk to speak. Mr. Falk.
what would I do without ample good staff? Now we will recognize Mr. Falk for 5 minutes.
It breaks to hear everything, so did you ask me to start my testimony?
Say yes or start.
Yes, please.
Okay. Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Scott, and members of the committee gave me the opportunity to Jim Falk, a fourth-generation farmer from Swift County, Minnesota. I farm with my son Andrew and Farmers Union and a testified Farmers Union. Our farm includes about 1,000 acres, of which approximately 500 are in crop production, 250 in pasture and hay meadow, and the balance in conservation. Since 1985, we have also owned a seed cleaning facility, Falk Seed Farm, Inc., which is now a key part of our operation. We are a small regional seed company, with the majority of our customers farming within a 100. The energy consumption of the seed plant is significant due to the electrical motors needed for processing. We process seed or grain for approximately 10 months of the year, with October through May being our peak season. From 2016 through 2019, the average annual cost of power to run $1,332 per year. My wife Karen and I have been interested in utilizing renewable energy to offset our power consumption for quite a while. Part to offset the carbon footprint that we produce. Majority produced on site. As the rise, there should be costs paid for. In 2016, we installed a 30 kW wind turbine to connect to our three-phase power, and in 2017, we installed a 33 kW solar system on the seed plant roof power. The tax credits for small wind and solar were forecast to be received while those credits were available. While we applied for grants from USDA's Rural Energy for America program to help fund both projects, our applications were unsuccessful. It seems the demand for REAP grants far exceeds the funding available. With both our wind and solar systems, we're approximately 73.7% of the seed plant's power needs on an annual basis. This hits our target of producing approximately 70% of the seed plant's power needs when we initially made our plan, and I believe provides long-term sustainability to help reduce our energy cost. I was asked experience with on-farm, but my experience also includes on-farm solar energy as well. As a result, I'm familiar with the positives and negatives of both. To be sure, both energy systems have their place. Wind can produce power any time of the day or night if the wind is blowing. Is underperforming in comparison to what was projected when I purchased the machine. My tower height is 100 feet, and others likely have higher outputs than mine. Our solar system, meanwhile, is performing above what was projected as their likely output for power per year. The hybrid system I have works well for me. However, I feel farmers to produce their own renewable energy with a system that fits their operation. It makes good sense that farmers and ranchers to produce their own clean energy on site. To accomplish this, we need tax incentives, including an extension of the tax credits, along with increase in targeted research spending, and additionally, to get more renewable energy systems installed in private lands. On-farm renewable energy systems are vital tools for U.S. farmers and ranchers and their businesses as they work towards economic and environmental sustainability and combat climate change. My farm and business is just one example of that. Thank you for your experience with you today.
Sorry. Mr. Bryant J. Severs, owner of Severs Family Farms, Chief Operating Officer, Agri-Renew, on behalf of America Biogas Council, Stockton, Iowa. We'll hear your 5 minutes.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Minority Member Scott, Chairman Peterson, and Ranking Member Conaway, and members of the committee, thank you for asking me to testify today. During these especially unsettling times, I'm grateful to share with you how farm energy production has helped my bottom line, improved the risk-bearing ability of our farm, and benefited the community around us. My wife Lisa and I are fifth-generation owners of a farm near Stockton, Iowa. We run a 2,400 head beef cattle feedlot. We produce corn, soybeans, and hay on approximately 2,200 acres. Our farm operates 2 complete mix anaerobic digesters, which produces biogas that's used to generate electricity, which is sold to Alliant Energy, as well as reclaimed heat, which is used to heat our digesters and other outbuildings. We use a variety of feedstocks in the digesters, including beef cattle manure, biomass from our farm fields, organic food residuals left over from processing food and purpose-grown cover crops. Conservation and environmental stewardship are paramount to our operation. We've implemented numerous water and soil quality practices over the years, including grassed waterways, field borders, buffer strips, terraces, contour farming, no-till, strip-till, grid soil sampling, and cover crops. When my wife and I constructed our digesters and renewable energy facility on our farm in 2013, we were grateful to receive support from the federal government through a few programs: the Renewable Energy for America program, or REAP, the Environmental Quality Incentives program, or EQIP, a Section 1603 energy grant through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, and an energy efficiency rebate from our local service provider, Alliant Energy. We also participated in the Biomass Crop Assistance Program, where the biomass we captured from our cornfields was first used as bedding for our cattle and then as a substrate in our digesters. Without the significant support we received from the federal government for programs like REAP and EQIP, as well as the BCAP program, we would not have been able to build our highly functioning biogas systems, which generates renewable energy and soil products while making our farm more sustainable and protecting our air, water, and soil. From an investment standpoint, we leveraged these federal programs to secure $4.8 million in private investments to construct our digester facilities, so that for every federal dollar spent, almost $5 in new private investment has been made. Unfortunately, funding for many of these programs has disappeared since 2013. Reinstating the funding for these and other valuable programs will allow farmers and ranchers to design and construct on-farm anaerobic digester facilities so they can realize the benefits we've received, which has helped us weather financial challenges due to falling commodity prices, to improve our water quality, soil health, and management of organic waste streams from our beef cattle feedlot, as well as other agricultural processing facilities in our region. When it comes to addressing our changing climate, enhancing water and air quality, improving soil health, increasing agriculture sustainability, while providing valuable economic benefits, I genuinely believe on-farm anaerobic digesters can play a vital and significant role. I serve as vice chair and board member of the American Biogas Council, which represents over 200 companies in all parts of the biogas supply chain. We also collaborate with the Ag Energy Coalition and Solutions from the Land. These organizations believe that strengthening on-farm economies is key to advancing the deployment of renewable energy and the production of biofuels and renewable chemicals. Many aspects of the 2018 Farm Bill support on-farm energy production, most of which are included in the energy title. These programs create high-value jobs and new income streams for American farmers, accelerate the commercialization of new technologies, and support the construction of biogas systems and biorefinery systems in rural communities. I urge the committee to push for full implementation of the Farm Bill and support robust annual appropriations for these exceptionally impactful programs. We're especially pleased to see that the appropriators have recognized the need to support technologies that have been historically underfunded within REAP by establishing a REAP reserve fund for underserved technologies such as biogas and small wind energy. The House Appropriations Committee encouraged USDA to establish the reserve fund and provided $10 million in funding for a pilot program to be created at the USDA. We are hopeful that this will improve access and will see greater deployment of these exceptionally valuable technologies. The Farm Bill also contained two initiatives of importance to the biogas industry. Section 9011, the Carbon Utilization and Biogas Education Program, was established and recognized that digesters are one of the greatest methods available to trap methane-emitting waste products and convert it to renewable energy and nutrient-rich soil amendments. However, this program is yet to receive funding. Another priority highlighted by the committee in the conference report, the establishment of the Biogas Opportunities Roadmap Task Force, has yet to be acted upon by the USDA. While outside of the jurisdiction of this committee, we also urge the committee to support the renewable fuel standard as it continues to provide value to on-farm energy producers. A strong and properly administered RFS, not undermined by the unscrupulous issuances of small refinery exemptions, raises all boats in the rural economy. We also urge the committee to support efforts to extend tax policies that support on-farm energy production, such as the PTC and ITC for renewable energy, and to take under advisement the recent recommendations pertaining to sustainable agriculture released by the House Select Committee on Climate. Thank you for your time today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Severs. And now I recognize Mr. Will Harris for 5 minutes from Georgia.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Scott, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to be here today. White Oak Pastures is a 153-year-old family farm that geographically surrounds our town of Bluffton, Georgia. It's a vertically integrated, multi-generational farm. We utilize multi-species rotational grazing practices to produce beef, pork, lamb, poultry, eggs, organic vegetables, and honey. The fourth, fifth, and sixth generation of the Harris family are currently living and working on the farm. There are 3 topics I want to cover with you today: regenerative farming as an economic driver and as a tool to help mitigate climate change, and paired with renewable energy to create more economic opportunities for rural America. First is an economic driver. Every conscious American recognizes the decay that has occurred in rural communities over the last half century. Prior to World War II, most rural communities enjoyed a fairly consistent agrarian economy. But after the war, the centralization of our food processing system began, and new mega plants owned by large multinational companies started to starve out small, hometown, locally owned processing businesses. When I was growing up in rural Georgia in the 1960s, every county had at least one family-owned slaughter plant. Today, almost every one of these is gone from our 159 county state. And this is a tragedy that replicated all across the United States. Regenerative farming at White Oak Pastures has revitalized the economy of our county, and it can do the same for other communities across the nation. White Oak Pastures is the largest private employer in our county. In the last 20 years, our farm has grown from 4 full-time employees and $1 million in annual revenue to 155 full-time employees and $20 million in revenue. We write payroll checks for over $100,000 every week in a county that has fewer than 3,000 residents. The average salary of our employees is almost twice that of the average employee in the county. There could and should be a White Oak Pastures in every agricultural county in the United States. It's a highly replicatable business model. The second topic is regenerative farming to mitigate climate change. This has been scientifically proven by life cycle assessment, and I provided the link to that in my written comments. White Oak Pastures may be the only farm in the world that has a peer-reviewed third-party scientific study that verifies and validates that we sequester more carbon than we emit. We are contributing to the mitigation of climate change. Our farm has sequestered over a ton of carbon per acre per year on 3,200 acres of land for the last 20 years. During this period of time, our farm has pulled the carbon equivalent of almost 500,000 barrels of crude oil out of the atmosphere and sequestered it in the soil. White Oak Pastures used a $50,000 USDA REAP grant to construct a 50,000-watt solar array in 2010. It provides our farm with the energy resilience and helps power our own farm red meat and poultry slaughter plants, both of which are USDA inspected. A couple of years ago, I learned that Silicon Ranch, one of the largest owner-operators in the solar power plants in our country, would be building a solar array on over 1,000 acres of land next to my farm. I invited my new neighbors to visit, and during the visit, we discussed the opportunity for a mutually beneficial partnership. I would use my livestock and regenerative farm practices to manage the vegetation on their solar farm. It worked. White Oak Pastures will be bringing regenerative land management to 2,400 acres of solar farm land in southwest Georgia. 20 years from now, Silicon Ranch's land will have 5% organic matter, just like mine does. The White Oak Pastures Silicon Ranch partnership model is replicatable anywhere. It's win-win for anywhere that solar developers and farmers and rural communities. Adding regenerative cattle grazing to the model would greatly expand the opportunity. Integrating cattle grazing onto these large-scale solar farms is not an option without more research and development. In partnership with the National Renewable Energy Lab, White Oak Pastures and Silicon Ranch have applied to work with the Department of Energy through a grant from them to construct a prototype on my land, power my slaughter facilities. It will demonstrate the cattle and solar are compatible. White Oak Pastures is honored to have to be able to transform renewable energy to renewable energy into regenerative energy. I want to thank the members of the House Agriculture Committee for giving me the opportunity to share our story today. It's a story of hope and innovation, and a story of how we can bring prosperity back to impoverished rural America. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. And let me just say that your testimony was very revealing, and I agree with you 100%. Now, in your testimony, you said so much, and oh, I'm sorry. What?
Mr. McCluskey?
Oh. Mr. Harris, you got me so excited about what you were saying that I skipped the script. Thank you, Mr. Harris, and thank you, Ranking Member, for pulling my coattail on that. I now recognize Dr. Mike McCloskey for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank also the subcommittee members for inviting us here today to be able to share with you our experience. Also, I would like to thank Congressman Barrett for such a kind introduction today. So, listening to the previous colleague speakers today, I don't want to dwell a lot on past projects. It's clear that a lot of us over the years have invested heavily our capital on renewable energies on our farms because we believe that's the right thing to do. And as we have done those investments, I want to assure you, and I think that you have heard that through the other speakers, that the technology now is at a level that it's reliable and trustworthy. And that's the first thing that I hope this committee fully embraces. So therefore, I think our big challenge is how do we make it mainstream? How do we take what some of us who had scale were able to take our capital and invest in and prove out these technologies and now grow it for all our industry. In the dairy industry, for example, we as an industry, through our trade organization, through our checkoff dollars, we have come together and have made a commitment to a net zero industry by 2050. So we have a challenge for us to take everything that we have learned that we know we can do and drive it into all of our farms industry-wide. Now, this commitment is a collective commitment. Not everyone will hit net zero. Some people will sequester, as one of my colleagues just presented, which I agree 100% with. A lot of us will be able to sequester and do better than net zero. Some will hit net zero and some may not get to net zero. But as a collective industry, we have committed in the dairy industry that we're going to go to net zero. So let me just take one big example that I believe that we can get there with your support. And some of this is truly outside of your jurisdiction, but it's your influence in Congress that can help create an atmosphere of investment in biogas, nutrient recovery, and clean water. So let me start with the two main issues that we need to resolve is the need for helping with the capital costs. I think Chairman Peterson said it very well a little while ago. We need to find ways to help with this capital cost so we can take this mainstream, but there got to be ways that over time we get out of that. And I'm 100% for that comment. Let me explain what I mean here. I think we have to have an environment where we support an ITC, an investment tax credit of 30% for this type of equipment that deals with biogas, nutrient, and clean water. And an ITC, the way it works is when an industry is ripe to be able to move forward, it can really stimulate thousands of jobs and self-pay for itself. So an ITC credit is really not a cost. It actually brings additional money into Treasury by creating thousands of jobs and creating an industry. And I think this industry today is ripe to receive an ITC of 30%. I hope Congress can consider that, and I encourage you to. I'm not going to dwell a lot on USDA because I think my colleagues have expressed it very well. Through rural development, there are tremendous opportunities there, and also through NRCS. And I think the important thing there is to take to be able to stack these programs. We need to and USDA has done a great job of that, but we still have states where we cannot stack different types of programs together to help medium-sized and small farmers participate. So those two things, an ITC and stacking, will be a tremendous help to be able to get small farmers, medium-sized farmers, to be able to get capital, to be able to invest in this technology. The second thing that we need is a reliable market. And my colleagues also expressed the issues about reliable markets that have fallen apart over the years, and great projects, therefore, have disappeared. And we need to have a reliable market. Well, again, here we have an example where we already have a reliable market and we haven't put it to work well enough, and that is through our renewable fuel standards that lies there at EPA. We have a pathway, the electric pathway, that we need to put to use. By 2030, there will be a total of 20 million electrical vehicles, including trucks, 18-wheeler trucks, on the road. And we can use this pathway, this electric pathway, through the RIN process and be able to subsidize the income of the electrical produced to these farmers in a fantastic way. If you do a conversion of a RIN, the renewable numbers, if you do a conversion that we're getting in gas today, where we're selling gas into the low carbon fuel standards, if that's 77,000 BTUs, if you convert that into electricity, which I have, by getting a RIN that can move an electrical vehicle that's already in place, that we're not using, it sits there at EPA, by getting that amount of money coming back to the electrical generation would be sufficient to be able to justify that investment that the farmer could make. And we could take this whole concept from just people like ourselves that have scale, we could take this to mainstream U.S. farmer to be able to take advantage of it. So I thank the committee for listening to this. I think it's a simple future approach that we could have. By applying these two concepts, I believe we can get to more than 50% of our dairy industry commitment of a net zero by 2050. I believe we can be there by 2040 or even sooner if we can have support of this level. Thank you very much.
And thank you. And now my turn. I tell you, this has really been, it's been so exciting to hear each of your presentations. And I'm very excited about this project, as you can see, because I've long been advocating that it is the agricultural industry that can lead the way in terms of dealing with renewable fuels and our energy. So that, and each of your testimonies have certainly explained that. Now, Mr. Harris, let me start with you, because you gave some very profound statistics, some very meaningful information. You first of all said that, which is important, that every week you inject into Georgia's economy over $100,000 in salaries with your employees. And then you made another statement that really shocked me in a way. You said that you were able to produce over 500,000 barrels of crude oil out of the air. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's what you said. Both of those statements really hit it on the nail of how dynamic this whole issue is, and it rests in the hands of those of us in the agricultural industry. So, could you give us the top 3 or 4 things that we here in Congress can do to help you and the others who are literally pioneering in this effort? What is it that we in Congress need to do most that will help you?
To be clear, the comment about the oil, we didn't produce oil, we sequestered that equivalent. We sequester about a barrel of oil a year per acre in carbon dioxide equivalent. So that's where that came from. It's the same effect, just to be clear on that.
But the issue to me is not the amount, but you were able to get it out of the air.
Yes.
Can you maybe explain that a bit?
Yes, sir. So regenerative agriculture is about regenerating the cycles of nature. The cycles of nature are, to name a few, the carbon cycle, which is what we're talking about here, the mineral cycle, the energy cycle, the water cycle, the microbial cycle, all the cycles that produce an abundance in nature. That's how the oil got in the ground in the first place, is all those cycles working well since the time of the dinosaur, sequestering carbon, putting the energy into the soil. Right. Industrial farming practices breaks those cycles of nature. The use of cultivation, chemical fertilizers, pesticides, all break those cycles that I mentioned, and is disruptive. So the abundance is not there in the manner that it had been prior to all those technologies.
And now, if you could share with us, and I thank you for that explanation there, it's just profound, but could you share with us in my time that I have left, what is it that you can tell us that we in Congress need to do to help you?
Good. So first and foremost, I would say that a more careful look at how foods are labeled would be very helpful. I believe that there are intentional rules that mislead consumers in terms of product labeling. I think consumers really struggle to know what they're buying at the store. Second, to do what we've done here is highly replicatable. It's not highly scalable. It won't be, I won't operate in 20 states. It's highly replicatable. There can be many of us. The limitation is financing. I was blessed in inheriting a nice farm that I leveraged through common bank financing, small town bank financing. We borrowed $7.2 million, invested it in this processing facility. I think that's important because what's been done here was done by a proud University of Georgia College of Agriculture student with bank financing, not a Rhodes Scholar with a trust fund. So it's highly replicatable. But access to financing, more truth in labeling through USDA, and I can probably come up with some more things. I did not anticipate that question.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to recognize the ranking member, Austin Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to point one thing out, and Mr. Harris said in his testimony, I'm from the great state of Georgia, and you know, we do have 159 counties, and every county had at least one family home owned, we don't like to call them this, but they're actually slaughterhouses. And when we talk about the environment, I think it's important to point out that that today in Georgia, and Mr. Harris can correct me on this if he feels I'm wrong, but if you grow a hog in South Georgia, that hog is put on a truck, and many of those trucks haul those hogs all the way to Tar Heel, North Carolina, before they're actually processed. And certainly there's a tremendous amount of diesel that's burned by those semis that are hauling those trucks. And I think that as those small businesses shut down around the country, not only has it led to a damaging consolidation of the supply chain and our food supply, but it does force a tremendous amount of additional transportation cost but because of that. And so one of the things that I do think that we could do that would be in the benefit of the country would be to help small food processors around the country so that we don't have to haul the product so far. The other thing I want to do is mention that, as I said, I think we can and should do a better job of taking care of the environment. I think that all of these gentlemen have done some extremely creative things, and I'm proud of that. I do want to mention my concerns again with solar subsidies, and I do believe that when we see highly productive ag land, irrigated cropland coming out of production and going into solar fields, that is an indication that perhaps the solar subsidies are too generous. And I do think that those solar fields have certainly a negative impact on the habitat that is so important for our wildlife and other things. And I would like to ask to submit this to the record. This is from Bloomberg, and it is an article that says Bill Gates says wind and solar subsidies should go to something new, encouraging us to move to newer, more productive technology. With that said, gentlemen, I appreciate you being here and look forward to taking your solutions for the environment and expanding on them. I would note that all of the things that you've done and your efforts are voluntary, and I appreciate that. And I certainly support these practices remaining voluntary. But for each of the witnesses, would you just briefly tell us what was the reason you decided to take on the renewable energy projects on your farm, and what environmental concerns do you feel your particular project is helping to address?
Ranking Member Scott, this is Brian Sievers. I'd be happy to go first if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
The driver behind the incentives that we looked for in creating our renewable energy projects really focused around a belief that our resources, our natural God-given resources, the air, land, water, sun, and people, are something that we need to find the highest and best use for in everything that we endeavor and strive to do. And that's why looking at renewable energy projects achieves that objective, and really it helped fulfill maybe something that was more in our heart as well as in our head. When you look at how can we protect our water, our soil, our air, we think renewable energy production on farm is helping us to accomplish that. And if you look at some of the history of what we've done on our farms in the various conservation practices, why it's just another way in which we can advance that set of objectives or goals for our farming operation. In terms of the environmental solutions that we found, really helping, I joke sometimes with the falling energy prices that we've seen, the price of electricity that we now get for the electricity we sell to the grid is about 25% less today than it was when we signed our power purchase agreement back in 2012 with our power local service provider. So we are suffering financially because of low commodity prices, if you will, for the energy we sell through electricity. but we still receive tremendous value from those natural soil amendments and soil products that we produce every day, 50 to 60,000 gallons a day of natural fertilizers that we're able to use on our farms, in our fields. And that's really the environmental solution that we've found, is that we don't have to purchase inorganic forms of fertilizer that's imported in many cases. We can produce those right on our own farm. So Dr. McCluskey was right, making sure we focus on ways to help incentivize the nutrients that we produce through these digesters and our biogas systems, but also if there's any way in which can be helped through this committee to encourage the EPA to look at the eRINs pathway, that would also be extremely helpful too. And again, it would help address environmental challenges and climate challenges we're all facing.
Thank you. And I appreciate your answer. My time is expired, unfortunately. Maybe we'll have a time for a second round. Again, Mr. Chairman, I want to tell you, I think we can and we should do a better job of taking care of the environment. I do think we have to keep in mind the habitat for the wildlife and the animals. And let me commit again to working with you. Yeah. One of my primary concerns is that when something has proved not to work, is that we don't ever seem to be able to get rid of that. And while I would tell you, I think diesel particulate filters on our equipment have done a good job of reducing emissions, I think diesel exhaust fluid is something that has not, and that's just an example of something that we continue to effectively mandate with diesel exhaust fluid that I think there's little to no benefit from.
Yes, and you have been doing outstanding work on this, Austin, and providing great leadership, so I look forward to working with you on this. This is a very exciting and dynamic area, and our farmers are doing such fantastic things, and as we're witnessing here today. Now I'd like to recognize our ranking member of the full committee and our former chairman of the full agriculture committee, my friend Mike Conaway.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. Dr. McCluskey, thank you for being here today. As you know, I'm an avid consumer of your chocolate milk. And when the COVID happened and the supply chains across everything was disrupted, there's obviously no interest like self-interest. I was concerned that the chocolate milk would not be available, but your system worked wonders, and I've not missed a day. And I also need to thank you for, you need to start the clock. I also need to thank you for your running commentary with my good friend Phil Fouch. I'm forever indebted for that, for you doing it. When the COVID issues happened and everything shut down, back up a second. Obviously, all of these operations are dependent on a normal business stream, a normal operations, the normal cash flows that you have in place in order to make it work. Can you visit with us a little bit about what happened to you and your system when the disruptions in the supply chain happened in March, April, and May, and how that affected your ability to maintain the sustainable and environmental stewardship programs that you had on your operations? Were those affected by that disruption?
Thank you, Congressman. Yes, it was devastating, like it was for everyone in the country. The problem of dumping, we had to dump milk on the farms. We couldn't collect all the milk at all the farms. And obviously a collapse in the whole pricing system because of the shift from food service, the shutdown of food service, increase in retail, but not enough to offset the food service. So there was a lot of disruptions in the marketplace, resulting in unbelievably low prices. I mean, we saw numbers that were 50% below previous incomes. And we all know that all of us farmers work on very thin margins. So when they take 50% out of your gross pay, it is devastating. And it was devastating for small producers, medium-sized producers, large producers on an equal basis, because it's all relative to the hundredweight of milk. There is some value in scale, as we all know. But in a situation as devastating as we all went through, that damage is felt all the way through. I don't care how big you are. I don't care, what your efficiencies are. I believe that in those cases, all producers should be treated equal. We do accept within many of our programs in USDA that there should be help for smaller farms versus larger farms. There's some differences in how these programs work. There's some limitations these programs put on some larger farms. But I do not believe that in cases of disasters and devastations like we live, that distinction should be made, because I believe that all farmers suffer equally through this, and that all farmers should be helped in some way that is on an equal basis, equal footing. As far as our environmental efforts, Mr. Congressman, we continue them all, obviously at a tremendous expense, but we always hope for a sunny day to come, and we kept on investing in everything we invest, and we're back up and running, but obviously with a big hole in our economic performance, and hopefully we can make that up in the years to come.
Well,
thank you for asking.
I appreciate that. I know you also run an agritourism program at Fairworks as well that had to be affected. Let me just make a comment about the E-RINs program. And both of you have talked about how that would help serve it. My concern is that simply shifts costs from one group to the other in a particularly convoluted way. I'm not sure what that record is going, but
can we have one of our technicians sort of maybe?
Anyway, it shifts the cost from around in a very convoluted way. You mentioned having a lot of electric vehicles on the roads. We currently don't have a way for those electric vehicles to share their impact on our road system. And so finding a way to pass these extra electricity costs on to the folks who want to drive cars and those kinds of things, I think might be a better solution than hiding it with the way the RINs program works. And I'm really concerned about how that would flow through, because at some point in time it's got to get to a customer, and if we keep it opaque, it makes it difficult to figure that out. And so having a more straightforward way to do that, as well as you all promote electric trucks and cars, you're going to have to be a part of the conversation that says, how do those vehicles share the cost of our roads and bridges the way that fossil fuel cars and trucks have currently been supporting that program. So I appreciate all four of you being here today and your efforts to try to keep the environment clean. We all want to breathe clean air and drink clean water. And I share the chairman and the ranking member's concerns in that regard. And thank you for your roles in trying to push forward good policy. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, ranking member. And now we'll recognize Ms. Acne from Iowa.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, and thank you all for being here today and lending your expertise to the committee. Brian, it's always great to see an Iowan before us in committee, so thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate all the different success stories on the benefits of the farm energy programs, in particular how it can result in positive climate outcomes while creating more economic opportunity for farmers. I've said this all along, we can be sustainable and we can grow economic viability at the same time. It's something I firmly believe we need to invest in and improve access to. We know how successful REAP, or the Rural Energy for America program, has been, but also how oversubscribed it is with strong demand. Mr. Harris, I'm pleased to hear that your business received a REAP solar grant that helped make your operations sustainable. So I've got a couple of quick questions for you. Number one, how did you find the REAP process worked for you, and how was your solar array worked out? And then second, do you think the program should be expanded so that more folks like you around the country can deploy rural renewables like solar, wind, and biogas systems?
Thanks for the question. The REAP grant worked very well for us. We received a lot of support from our USDA representative that handled it for us. He spooned and fed us, and it went well. We have enjoyed when I built that facility, it provided about 40% of the power for our slaughter plants. We've expanded them, and so it's down to about 20%. And we're now applying for another grant through the Department of Energy, which will allow us to build a prototype to use cattle under the array. And we regenerate the soil, increase the carbon amount in the soil to sequester more carbon dioxide equivalent, as I mentioned earlier. It's a very important experiment. I would invite Mr. Scott to come and let me show you in White Oak Pastures here in Georgia that I disagree that we're not taking land out of agricultural production and putting it in solar energy production. We're using the same land for food production and energy production at the same time. And in doing so, we're putting more water into the soil, increasing the carbon, the organic matter in the soil from carbon sequestered from the air. So this experiment that we are working with, we've applied for the grant to build a new array on this farm to prove that it can further work to get maximum benefit from the cycles of nature.
Well, thank you so much for that. And Jim, I noticed that you were turned down for REAP, so I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are if REAP, how you would use it, what you think it could do if it were to be funded to meet the demand.
You may
Can you
have
hear
to,
me okay, Jim?
he may have to unmute your phone. Who was the question directed to? Mr. Falk.
There we go.
Oh,
Okay.
good.
Sorry. I apologize. We are breaking up occasionally here with this everything. I apologize. The question was regarding us not receiving a REAP grant.
Right. You were curious to hear what your thoughts are if we did fund this to the level of demand that we have. What do you think we'd be looking like?
I don't know what that level would be, but it would be significantly more than what it is because the amount of proposals that are come in for this funding far exceed are available. So it's a good program. It's a good tool. Not every project needs to be funded, but there are projects that probably shouldn't be funded. But I would say the majority of the projects that come in requesting a REAP grant have value, and unfortunately, when you don't, we are not able to fund your project. We don't have enough funds to continue to fund projects at that level. So.
Well, thank you so much. I have so many other questions, but my time is up. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Agnew. And now we'll represent Congressman Johnson from the great state of South Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the shout out for the great state. I'll ask two questions for each of the panelists, and for efficiency's sake, I'll ask them both, and then you can each go through and give your answers. And we'll go Falk, Severs, Harris, and McCloskey, so you kind of know where you are in the batting order. My question is first, what kind of community response did you get to the investments you were making in these projects? Did people seem to understand them? Was there opposition? Were people generally supportive? And then the second question is, what are you hearing with your colleagues in the ag industry? Does it seem as though there is more interest in people making investments like this? Obviously, policy plays a big role, but if they got the right kind of economic and policy environment, how much more projects like yours do you think we would see from your colleagues? So with those two questions in mind, let's go ahead and look to Mr. Falk first.
Interest in doing renewable energy on site. Well, of course, as the traffic of seed producers and growers and a number of folks that, and everyone asked questions about, and is it viable? And so I think there's a tremendous interest, and I've had nothing but positive feedback about it. I would make sure we have good access so that if we want a project, cooperation and in partnership with the providing the energy, so they have a role to play as a partner as well.
Very good. I think you're done, Mr. Falk. I heard a little break up there, but thank you for your answer. How about Mr. Sievers?
Thank you, Congressman. In Iowa, we participate in a protocol when it comes to siting livestock facilities like what we constructed, along with our renewable energy facility, that allowed public input through what's called the master matrix scoring process, where the Department of Natural Resources oversees the siting of a facility like ours, and then allows for local or public input through the county level. And so we went through a discussion with all of our neighbors. We voluntarily went to our neighbors, talked about what we were wanting to do, got very good feedback, positive feedback by and large. And then we had a chance to meet with our county board of supervisors, lay out our proposal, and subsequently they recommended that we be able to move forward to the Iowa Department of Natural Resources with our project. So I think by and large the community response we've received has been positive. With regard to the second question you raised and how our colleagues in our industry responding to the opportunities to look at additional anaerobic digestion and biogas facilities, we do see several projects starting to move forward in Iowa. The opportunities are tremendous. In Iowa, we have currently 3 on-farm anaerobic digesters. They all utilize beef cattle manure as well as some off-site co-feeds in their digesters. And our land mass in the state of Iowa is pretty comparable to Germany. And in Germany, there are 9,000 digesters. So the opportunities are tremendous for us to be able to grow and develop and utilize many of these organic waste streams in our anaerobic digester facilities. I don't expect to ever see that many facilities, but certainly more than 3, I think, is what we're going to hopefully look forward to here in the state of Iowa. And I do think we're going to continue to see more, especially with regard to livestock operations, especially dairy farms. And we'd like to also see equitably treated manure sources when it comes to scoring these facilities in programs like California's low carbon fuel standard. We think beef cattle manure, swine manure, dairy manure, all should be treated equitably when it comes to the scoring in those regulatory approaches. And that would help provide some incentives as well for beef cattle producers to also expand and develop more digester projects.
Thanks very much, and we'll just need to go to Mr. Harris. You've got about 30 seconds, and sorry, Dr. McCloskey, we ran short on time. Mr. Harris.
Today, we built a store. We renovated the courthouse and Methodist Church to be offices, built a restaurant. We have lodging, we have tourism. Bluffton, Georgia did not have a single new housing start from 1972 until 2015. Since then, we built or renovated a dozen houses in Bluffton, so it's well received. The question about colleagues embracing a different sort of farming, I would tell you that industrial, commodity, centralized agriculture has not been good for our land or our rural communities or most of our farmers. And I believe that movement will be consumer driven, but if consumers know the truth about their food, they will offer a market, and entrepreneurial farmers will step up and pivot. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. And now I'd like to recognize my friend, Ms. Sparnberger of Virginia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for hosting this committee hearing. I appreciate that we're having this hearing today. If we are going to effectively combat the climate crisis, farmers and producers have to be part of that solution. And Mr. McCluskey, if you will indulge me, my colleague, Mr. Johnson from South Dakota, was on a train of questioning, which I found to be very interesting. I know he ran out of time, but I'd like to begin with using my time to give you the opportunity to answer his question, which was about how did your community respond, and then how did your colleagues and counterparts respond to well, I'll defer to you, Mr. McCluskey.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I appreciate that. Yes, so the response was overwhelmingly positive. The nice thing about digesters and in our farms is we do produce renewable energy, but besides that, it produces so many other things beyond what solar or wind or other sources would produce in renewable energy. So we get the renewable energy, but we also, it's the beginning of a process of nutrient recovery of clean water. So that's really important to state, because through that nutrient recovery, we're helping our Clean Water Act and avoiding the serious issue of eutrophication in our waterways and our bays. And on top of that, on a local basis, it mitigates about 80 to 90% of the odor on the farm, and also is a great help in your fly control for neighbors as well. So it's very, very well accepted. So you get so much in one package versus some other alternatives that I just, there's been a lot of investment in solar, a lot of support for wind. I don't feel digesters have received that same level of support that produce energy 24/7. It's a constant source. If the sun's not shining or the wind isn't blowing, we're still producing energy. And we are doing so many other great things at the farm level by producing these great fertilizers that now can be handled in a much better way, by creating clean water, by eliminating odor, and other smaller issues like fly control, which isn't a small issue to a close by neighbor, believe me. So it's been very, very well accepted. And as far as other colleagues wanting to do the same, I have a visiting center at Fair Oaks. We have over 200,000 visitors a year that tour the farms and see the digest. So a lot of those are dairy farmers, and I get to interact with them. They would embrace this immediately if the financial situation was such. Again, we have the advantage of scale. Scale has been very beneficial for us. We have invested because of scale. It's a duty that we have, we believe, and we have to give back. And therefore, we believe that that regenerative farming, sustainable farming, these digesters and these investments in how we're farming is incredibly important. But not everyone can afford them. So people look at this, they really wish they could do it. So my point today is we need to help with the capital investment. I insist that ITC is something that is an investment of the government. It actually grows treasury, because this industry is ripe to explode. Thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs will be created. Industries will grow, and there'll be an incredible amount of manufacturing. I would tell you that in the dairy alone, based on the proposal that I shared a little while ago, I would see no less than 5,000 digesters created nationwide. And I wouldn't be afraid to say that thousands more than that, but I will conservatively tell you that if we had ITC credit, if we could use stacking proper from USDA, and if we had a secure market through eRINs, that this thing would explode for us, and we would see digesters dotted all over our country. It would help tremendously local farmers, local communities. These digesters can take, besides another advantage of digesters that I didn't mention, is that we can take in substrate. So other materials, organic materials, be it food waste or others, that we can bring into the digesters and actually double the amount of energy. I've done that on my digesters. You can double the amount of energy that we are producing by bringing in these food waste. And so you can become a community disposal for other waste within your area. So.
Mr. McCluskey, I am very, very glad that I spent my time following up on Mr. Johnson's question. I was planning to ask about REAP and a variety of other things, but I have found this to be fascinating. You have provided us, all four of you, with your answers to his question, good feedback. And I'm grateful. Thank you to the chair for indulging me in going over, and again to the witnesses, thank you for being here. Thank you for all that you do on your farms, and thank you for helping to educate members of Congress and the public in your work. Thank you.
And thank you. And now, Mr. Byrd, the gentleman
From Indiana.
from Indiana.
Dr. McCloskey is from Indiana in my district. So anyway, my question deals, Dr. McCloskey, you did not mention the facilities that you have also have an educational aspect. It's interesting to watch those children come to your place from urban and suburban areas and see calf born for the first time. So the educational benefits of your facility are also important. But my question deals with this. Mike, do you feel that multiple farms could participate in a single digester? And I'm going to tie...
Excuse me, someone needs to unmute, please. Thank you.
So anyway, the question I have is, Mike, whether or not several farms could participate in a single digester.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Congressman. Absolutely. Actually, we have 3 separate farms that all the manure ends up in one single very large digester. We have many models as I work with the industry through several of our trade organizations and businesses that we put together. We have several models where we go into areas that have smaller dairies, and we can then bring in manure from several dairies that have proximity. You need to stay with some level of proximity. I would say that within 10 miles you could create clusters of digesters that could work very well. Once you get a little further out than that, you have to be innovative of how you can do that. It still can be done, but you can be innovative. So there is great opportunity in that as well, is to be able to aggregate several farms to if they're close enough to do a digester.
Do you feel there are any barriers or regulations to being able to do that?
No, I don't necessarily. There'd be more of a local type regulation of moving manure in the proper vehicles and moving that manure down the roads. But that would be more of a local. I have not encountered ourselves any regulations in Indiana. Matter of fact, very supportive of our efforts with all of our manure management in Indiana. So I can't. Nothing that comes to my mind, Mr. Congressman.
Thank you very much, and we really appreciate you being here. Mr. Severs, do you have any thoughts?
Mr. Stevers, you may want to unmute.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry about that. The barriers that you bring up, that's a very good point. We've because of the financial challenges of selling electricity into a market that's very, very competitive against solar and wind, we've investigated and evaluated production of renewable natural gas from our digesters. One of the barriers that we've encountered is we'd like to even possibly transport biogas that is partially cleaned and compressed, not to the level that renewable natural gas is typically compressed, to a hub, if you will, that can take that gas, finish the cleanup and compression so that it can be injected into a pipeline. And that's what we're looking at here in Iowa, is what's called a hub and spoke approach, where you have an interconnect into a pipeline at, say, a large landfill facility, for example, and then several livestock operations in that region or neighborhood could pipe or transport their biogas partially cleaned to a facility for final cleanup. As I understand, there may be some regulatory hurdles with transportation of that type of, I don't want to call it raw biogas because it is partially cleaned and compressed, but it's not fully cleaned and compressed renewable natural gas either. So that would be one area we'd probably want to look into, is to make sure that there are no regulatory hurdles with that if the technology is available for us to be able to do that. And that's one of the things we're evaluating.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate all the witnesses being here today. My time is up, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Congressman Byrd. Now we'll hear from the distinguished Congresswoman from Minnesota, my friend, Ms. Craig.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. It's a real honor to be on your subcommittee. It's also a pleasure to have Mr. Falk here today, representing Minnesota's Farmers Union, an organization that I am proud to be a member of. I'm a strong supporter of the Rural Energy for America program, and I was proud to lead our efforts in the House to call for increased appropriations. And I'm pleased that the proposed full year 21 Ag Appropriations Bill provides a loan level of $20 million for the Rural Energy for America program, an increased level, and an appropriation of $476,000 for the loan subsidy. However, as Mr. Falk mentioned in his testimony, his farm's REAP grants were unsuccessful because the nationwide demand far outweighs the funding availability. I will continue to be a champion to increase this funding. Minnesota has long been a leader in the REAP program, so Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that we are taking time to work on the energy title today. These Farm Bill energy title programs are prime examples of farmers being part of the solution to our changing climate. Mr. Falk, as we begin to move into recovering from COVID-19, producers are looking for ways to increase on-farm income. How have you seen renewable energy increase your bottom line, and do you see it as a worthwhile investment for producers? What are the most effective incentives Congress can continue to provide? Mr. Falk?
You're going to have to repeat part of that. We were breaking up. I apologize.
No, that's fine. Mr. Falk, as we move toward recovering from COVID-19, we're looking for ways to increase on-farm income. How have you seen renewable energy increase your bottom line, and do you see it as a worthwhile investment for producers? What are the most effective incentives that Congress can continue to provide? Mr. Falk, are you with us?
Mr. Falk,
I
you
think,
may
but
have
I think
to
I'm understanding your question. I understand your question is what would be the benefits, or what do we need to do to enhance these programs? And the tax incentives are still an extremely important component. We've had an on and off system through the years, and industry needs to be able to be reliant that there are government if they're going to be investing in an industry. And then the REAP grants, obviously, were underfunded, and I appreciate for that. So,
well, as we all lock up today, I also want to mention that I do support $100 billion investment in high-speed internet across our nation. Mr. Falk, if you can hear me, I'm also interested in how you think we can support biofuels and bio-based manufacturer sector in order to create a value-added market for commodities and increase domestic manufacturing.
Well, all these tools are important to combat climate for our rural economy. And so, these the price of corn was $2.75 locally here last night when I looked, and devastating impact to our farmers with these low commodity prices. And anytime we can add value and it's
Mr. Falk, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here, and very proud of the state of Minnesota and the work that we're doing. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to recognize our ranking member for any excuse me, closing remarks that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And did I hear Mr. Falk say correctly? I have not heard this, that the price of corn locally for him was $2.75. Is that the number he quoted? Wow. Mr. Chairman, one is I think that this is an extremely important issue, not just for agriculture, but for the country. I want to commend the families that have been represented here today for their work and what they've done in their environmental stewardship. I again want to commit to you to work with you. I believe that we can and we should do a better job of taking care of the environment. And before I turn it back over to you, I do want to mention this. What Mr. Falk said with the price of corn and where commodity prices are right now. If commodity prices across this country stay where they are, regardless of what we do with the ability to reduce energy prices on the farm, there's not a farmer in this country that can survive with corn around $3 a bushel. It's not possible for our ag communities to survive with the commodity prices where they are in this country. I'm very concerned with, as we have another COVID package come forward, assuming that we are able to get to an agreement on a COVID package. I do believe, and while I don't believe this is a long-term solution for our farmers, in fact, I will tell you, I know it's not a long-term solution for our farmers, but I do think that any additional COVID package needs to have a fully funded round of market facilitation payments in addition to the other funds that are being discussed for our rural communities. Of the $4 trillion that the United States, through Congress and through the Fed, have currently spent, less than 0.5% of that has gone to our agricultural producers in this country. And let me just say, any additional COVID relief has got to show the respect to the agricultural producers in this country. Yes. That they deserve and the value that they bring to our national security through our food security. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to you, but I want to thank the witnesses for being here.
Well, I want to thank you for your comments, and I want you to know I absolutely agree with you. We have got to do much more to elevate our farmers up at the top of the spear, the lead point in the spear. And I've been telling people, I mean, we need to make sure that our farmers have the financial support to maintain this situation. We definitely need to make them a major part of the next COVID-19 funding package, and I will be there with you on the floor fighting for this. Folks, you know, as I keep telling people, food is our most important entity, and our farmers are the captains of the ship. But not only that, we have energy in the name of our committee, commodities, exchanges, and energy, and credit. That means our committee, ranking member, we're the engine to move this. And the first order of business is for us to move to start getting this financial package together So we can start advocating it right now, and I'm sure I'm speaking to staff. We need to be the ones to lift up our farmers, given this pandemic. Now, I've heard a lot about e-rents. We need to make sure that's alive and well. Our good friend Mr. Harris from down in Georgia, when I asked him what he felt was the most important thing, he said food labeling. Simple thing that can happen. We need to make sure we take care of that. And getting the type of financial backing to our farmers who are really out there working in a pioneering way with renewable fuels. And you mentioned another thing. When we talked with a few other people about the impending when we had the possible food shortages, the meat shortages because of the processors, our processing plants, that Tyson's and Smithfield's all went down because of this. And we had to move. There's so much out there. And we need to be the committee, and we are, as long as I'm chairman, as long as you're ranking member. Or if it goes the other way and you become chairman and I'm ranking member, you can believe that the Scott brothers, me and you, we're going to make sure that our farmers are getting the financial respect that they need and deserve, and that we make sure we lift them up. So I want everyone to know how much we really appreciate. This was excellent testimony. I learned a lot today, and we're going to carry this on and build on this. And our number one priority, if it's, I think you and I agree, is to get a COVID-19 package ready for the next tranche that we have. And we've got to start on that right now. And Ashley, I know you're capable of carrying that mission out. We got a great staff. Then I want to thank you also for putting this together, our very first hybrid. It looks like we may be doing this for quite a while. And I've got to get better. I've got to get me a mask that will keep up. But we will do it. That's simple things like that. And now, under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written responses from the witnesses to any questions posed by a member. This hearing of the Subcommittee of Commodity, Exchange, Energy, and Credit is adjourned. Thank you all very much.